Number 1.
My husband was almost abducted. I think about this moment when he and I get in a disagreement and immediately stop being mad at him. The idea that I almost lost him and never would have known what happened is enough to calm even my most justified anger. This happened about 3 years ago. I was 24 and he was 25, and it had pretty much been just me and him since we were 17 and 18, so my whole world was almost snatched away. It was late at night. I had just picked him up from work and we'd stopped at a Harris Teeter for a bottle of wine and a pizza. A couple of details. I had both of our cell phones in my purse because that's just how we did it when we were out together. He didn't like having it in his back pocket. Also, my husband is very pretty. I mean, he's handsome, but he's got long curly black hair and a slight build, and we both look way younger than we are. It's made us targets for more than a few weirdos. So, we're in line about to pay and he realizes that he left his wallet in the car. The store is pretty much empty and there was no one behind us, so he said, "I'll be right back," and ran out into the dark parking lot. Now, I'm anxious anyway, so when he was gone for literally 4 minutes, I ran outside to look for him. I saw a black truck with a trunk cover on it, driving away under the single streetlight and my husband nowhere in sight. My knees felt like jelly. I never understood that saying until that moment. I ran to our car praying that he was in there. Thank God he was. He was sitting in our locked car staring after the truck until I, too loudly, smacked the passenger window. He looked at me with giant terrified eyes. "Get in!" He leaned over and unlocked my door and yelled at me to lock it back when I sat down. He was shaking and freaking out and hugging me. I finally just squeezed him and said, "Baby, what the fuck happened?" He finally just said, "Give me my phone." And he called 911, so I heard the story as he was telling it to the operator, and it still makes me want to throw up when I think about it. He had walked out to the car and noticed a black truck a lane over. We both worked in stores in that shopping center and had never been afraid of the parking lot, but luckily it sent up a red flag and he hurried. As he fumbled with the keys, no fob, he heard the truck start up and figured it was leaving. In the time it took for him to grab his wallet out of the seat and turn around, the truck was behind him and a big man had opened the truck. As the man turned around to face him, my husband just fell and sat back in our car and slammed the door. The man didn't try the door right away. Instead, he hit the window in anger, and that's what saved my husband, because he managed in that moment to lock the doors. The man just stood there for a whole minute looking around, and then tried opening the door twice. Then he paced for a few seconds, then went back to the front of his truck and dug around. This whole time, my husband sat in horror without his phone. I wish that he'd thought to honk the horn or something to scare the guy or get someone's attention, but he was too scared to think. Finally, the man just climbed in and sat in his truck, and then sat down. Until I guess he saw me running out of the store and zoomed off. The police arrived, and my husband gave a description of the truck and the man. Tall, big, white, balding, dressed in all black, like a sweatsuit. The truck either didn't have a license plate, or he'd covered it up. They didn't find him, or that we know of. We've since moved out of the state. So, that's how my husband was almost kidnapped, for what I refuse to imagine. I stayed awake for nights just holding him and feeling him breathe. I almost lost him. After the shock wore away, he became rather serious about working out, because the fact that he wouldn't have been able to fight the man off haunts him. Fuck that guy for making my husband a victim.
Number 2.
So, I've sat here all day reading a lot of Let's Not Meet posts, and some of them brought up memories of an extremely scary time I had a couple of years ago. I was driving back to my college from my family's house after Thanksgiving break. I was traveling through a rural area in the Midwest, and I suddenly had the urge to pee badly. I was reading all of the road signs I came across to see if there was a nearby town that I could stop at to find a gas station or something to use their restrooms. Unfortunately, the nearest town was 30 miles away, and I had to pee real bad. It was unbearable. I finally made the decision to get off at the next exit that I found, even though they don't lead to any towns. Shortly after I pulled off on the next exit, I came across a gravel road. I thought this was perfect because I didn't want to get in trouble for exposing myself in front of anybody. It was a very private road. So, just so you're all aware, I'm a female. It's very difficult for females to pee on the side of the road. I thought the best course of action would be to take my empty McDonald's cup and pee into that. I did just that, inside of my car, just in case anyone drove down the lonely road. I had finished my business and dumped the cup into the grass on the side of the road. I was starting my car and getting ready to turn my car around back the way that I came when I saw a bright red car speeding down the road that I was on. It startled me, but they drove right on past. I thought to myself, must be the locals out messing around. I started to drive off and I saw a dingy, rusted red pickup truck coming down the road after the car. They too drove past me. As they passed though, I saw two male passengers who were staring straight at me. This freaked me out, but I told myself all the more reason to get a move on. I still kept my eye on the pickup truck though, and I saw them turning around, coming straight at me. This freaked me out so much that I decided the best course of action would be to drive in their direction, continuing on the gravel road as opposed to turning around, giving them the opportunity to chase after me. I drove right by them again and saw that they were grinning at me. I was so scared I hit the gas, which on gravel road doesn't do much good. I finally got a grip on the road and headed along the gravel road. I looked in my rearview mirror and they were following me again. I was freaked out at this point. My hands were shaking and my foot was flooring the accelerator. I then reached down for my phone. Now, I'm not the person to call 911 in just any situation. In fact, I was scared to call 911 because I was afraid that I was just being paranoid. But as I looked in my rearview mirror again and saw them gaining on me, I called the police. When I called the police, the operator picked up and I explained to her what was happening. During this phone call, the men in the pickup truck were so close that I couldn't see their front tires. I was sliding all around the gravel road, trying to stay on the phone with the operator. She was giving me directions to the nearest town several miles away. They followed me the entire way there, all the way until I reached the police station. I saw them turn around very quickly because they knew that I was out of their reach. I definitely learned my lesson from this, and I think from now on, I'll stick to peeing in public restrooms.
Number 3.
I'm a Canadian student, female, early 20s, studying in the UK, and I'm currently travelling home to see my family. I typically fly out of Manchester as it's simpler to get onto from northern UK where I'm living, but I found a cheap flight that leaves early tomorrow morning that I couldn't pass up. The problem is, it takes quite a few hours to get to the airport from where I live, so I ended up having to take the train from downtown London to Gatwick Airport from 2 to 3 AM. I waited mostly alone for an hour for my train to arrive, but about 20 minutes beforehand, a guy comes in and sits on a bench about 20 feet from me. I immediately got a bad vibe, but figured there's security cameras, and he was far enough away, so I just forgot about it. The train arrived at 2 AM, and the journey takes just over an hour. As it pulled up, I had this urge to walk away from this man and sit in a different compartment with more people. But when I turned to walk away, he gestured to help with my bags and I ended up getting into the apartments that pulled in front of us. There was only this man and one other in the compartment with me, neither one with luggage, which struck me as odd on a train headed to the airport. One of the men was sitting a few rows in front of me and one a few rows behind. I felt very uneasy but felt slightly trapped, so I decided to keep an eye on the man in front of me by watching his reflection in the window. He kept muttering things to himself, looking at me and smirking, and had multiple short phone conversations in a hushed voice. The man behind me was doing similar things. After a few stops, another man got on, which calmed my nerves, but seemed to annoy the man in front of me. He then moved seats to a row closer to me, and now within his eye line, where he pretended to read a book while staring at me intently over it. He was close enough now that in his next phone conversation I could make out the phrase, "Yeah, not now." There was one stop left before the airport, and the third man got up to get ready to exit. I can't explain the feeling of fear I felt thinking that I'd be alone in this compartment with these two men as I fumbled with my keys to get them between my fingers in the horrible case that I'd had to defend myself. The man in front of me then got up and moved to a row behind me, away from where the other man was sitting, and I heard a faint, "Yeah, let's go for it." At this point, I saw my opportunity, and I guess my body decided on flight rather than fight as I picked up all my bags and hauled ass past the man about to get off and onto the next apartment. Thankfully, there were a few people there that I was able to relax. When we arrived at the airport, I tried to stay with the group of people getting off, as I knew the other two men would be exiting as well. But in my confusion finding the way to the terminal, the man from in front caught up to me. I veered off over by some station employees and dawdled there while I waited for him to leave. He kept looking over at me as he paced around a bit before leaving. I watched him go up the escalator, staring at me as he ascended. I waited a minute and figured he'd given up, so I stepped onto the escalator. As soon as I reached the top, I saw the man standing there staring at me, so I quickly shouted to another employee, asking them if they would show me around the way to the terminal. Thankfully, it was close by, and I was soon in the safety of the airport. Obviously, there is no way to know if I was being paranoid, but I sincerely believe that there is something built into our genetics that lets us know when we are in danger. I'm not typically a paranoid person, and wasn't originally nervous about travelling in London alone, nor was I scared or uneasy around any of the other men that I encountered tonight. But something about these guys told me to just get the fuck out of there fast, and I'd rather have overreacted than ended up in a dangerous situation.
Number 4.
This just happened to me a few nights ago, and I'm still shaken up, so bear with me. I'm a female bartender at a small cafe that doubles as a venue. During the day, we serve coffee and lunch, and at night we have a full bar with bands, comedy shows, etc. On this night, there was an open mic comedy show. Not a lot of comedians showed up, so we ended up closing up the shop early and I was ready to go home. I had a patron come in and order a single beer during the comedy show. He was acting nervous, but being a female bartender, I get male customers that are shy and don't want to talk to women, so I didn't think much about it. He sat down, sipped his beer, and watched the show. Since we closed early, everyone was pretty much gone, and I wanted to lock up and clean so I could get home as well. After I escorted the last couple out of the bar and got ready to lock the door, I see the man from earlier walk down the back hallway and into the men's restroom. Not even a minute later, he burst out through the door yelling, "Hurry, come back here, I need your help." I stood at the opposite end of the hallway and asked him what was wrong. "The toilet is overwhelming, there's water all over the floor, help me clean this up." I could tell that something was wrong and I replied, "It's okay man, it happens, I'll mop it up later, I'm just trying to close up right now." He continued to argue with me, trying to get me to come into the bathroom with him as I stood about 20 feet away down the hallway. Finally, he walks towards me very aggressively and tries to grab my arm. "You need to come back here, now," he says. I immediately put my hands out in front of me so he cannot come any closer, and I tell him that he has to leave. He walks outside and I lock the door behind him. I check the bathroom and it's completely spotless, no water on the floor at all. I flush the toilet and urinal and they're both working fine. I start to get nervous and I take my large pocket knife and clip it to the waistband of my pants, just in case. As I'm cleaning our espresso machine and putting toppers on the liquor bottles, I hear a tapping noise. I look up at the front of the store, which is one big window that has a few curtains covering it, and the same man is tapping on the window, waving at me and laughing like a maniac. I watch him walk over to the door and pull on it. It doesn't open since I locked it after he left. He then starts screaming and pounding on the glass, saying, "Open the fucking door, I'm going to fucking kill you." Fight overcame flight at this point, and I walked around the counter and about 6 feet away from the door. Then I pulled out my knife and locked eyes with him and then yelled, "I'm calling the cops, get the fuck out of here." He smiled and walked out of view of the window. At this point, all of my adrenaline just crashed. I locked myself in the office and called 911 crying, explaining that I'm alone and that a man tried to lure me into the bathroom and was outside trying to get into my bar. I waited an hour and a half, no police showed up. I called my boyfriend and he drove up to the shop. My manager watched the security cameras from home, making sure that the man didn't come back. I did the deposit and immediately drove home, my boyfriend following close behind me. My male busboy has been coming into work with me, so I'm not alone anymore, and the managers have been keeping an eye on the security cameras while I'm working.
Number 5.
This occurred in North Carolina. It didn't scare me as much then as it should have, until it was too late. We never felt safe living in that place, but we had to for 3 more years after this incident. We lived in an old barn that had been renovated into 2 apartments, split right down the middle. Both sides had 2 floors and a basement. It had a pond down the hill behind it and a huge field stretched out in place of a front yard. Right smack dab in the middle of the field was a junk pile. Old, rusty trash cans, tools, just junk. It also had the remains of an old doghouse our neighbour had built, then set out there to rot when the dog died. This is important later. So, we had neighbours on the other side of the barn/duplex. Very sweet older couple. They had a garden right around the corner of the house, where the wife would spend her day while her husband was at work. They mentioned one day that food had started disappearing from the kitchen. I thought I was losing my mind until an entire loaf of bread disappeared, said the wife. They chalked it up to their delinquent daughter stopping in without telling them and shopping as she'd done it before in their house. Months went by, and every now and again she'd mention something her daughter had stolen. Canned food, prepared meals from the fridge, a couple of pots and pans, some toilet paper, so on and so on. They never reported it because they didn't want their daughter to be in trouble. They just thought the whole thing was just sad. Weird stuff started happening around the house. We found the remnants of a campfire by the pond one day, and a bar of Irish Spring soap floating in the water. One day, I looked out the window towards the pond and saw what I thought was a person standing near the water. It scared the hell out of me, and I pointed it out to my husband. The longer we looked, we realized it was actually an item of clothing hanging from a tree. Maybe to dry? We were too spooked to go and look, and it was gone the next day. Here is where it gets super scary. We started missing food. It only happened twice, but the second time, we had gone on the rather long walk up our driveway to the mailbox. We had left the door unlocked, and when we got back, the ingredients for grilled cheese were on the kitchen counter, and there was a hot pan still on the stove. We called 911, and they did research around the yard. They didn't look in the field because it was just wide open with just the junk pile in the middle. Finally, one day, our neighbour left her door open for 5 minutes and went to the garden right by the house. In that time, her purse was stolen from the living room. No cars had pulled up, so someone had been watching her and took the opportunity. She called the police, and the next day they did another search. This time, they went to the field and realized there was the old makeshift doghouse. Inside, there was a bed made of old blankets, food wrappers in a neat pile, 2 beers, rolls of toilet paper, our neighbour's missing pans, heroin paraphernalia, and the sweet lady's missing purse, with everything missing and stuffed with leaves to use as a pillow. There had been a heroin addict living on our property for months, stealing from us, bathing in the pond, and watching us for the best opportunity to do so. He never stole anything of value except the purse, so I think he'd intended to be there a long while. I guess when he came back and saw what he thought was his house empty, he just never came back.
Number 6.
So, let's get some things cleared up before I start. I live in the USA, specifically in the Deep South. Lots of rednecks, trailers, and Trump supporters. I live in a lower middle class but safe neighborhood. My house or street has a hill with woods at the top, literally right behind my house and street. So, let's begin. It all started May of last year. I walked into my house after school, my parents gone and my brother coming in about 25 minutes later. So I put on sweatpants, pulled my hair up, the usual. In the south, it's really hot in May. So I go to open the windows. I get to one window towards the back of my house and see that the screen is tall, enough for a human to fit in. I just assumed my cats or my dog had broken it, as they are in and out throughout the day, with my grandmother watching over the house from about 8 AM until noon. So I walk through the living room. I notice something off about the mantle. I figure out what it is. A picture frame is sitting there, empty. The picture that used to be there was, you guessed it, of me. Chills go up my spine. It's creepy, but nothing to get my panties in a wad about. I just assumed my grandmother took it out so she could bring it back to her house. Very logical. Fast forward to 2 nights later, Friday night. Nothing unusual, relaxing in my bed and watching Shane Dawson munching on pretzels. I'm alone upstairs as my parents and brother are downstairs. I hear banging coming from my bathroom window. I just thought it was my cat. From the darkness of my hallway, I can just about make out a figure of a tall person standing and facing me. My blood runs cold. I scream for my dad. The figure then moves away back into the bathroom and I hear the window shut. My dad gets upstairs and I tell him what happened. He then grabs a bat from the garage and tells my mum and my brother to go into my parents' room with me. My dad finds nothing. That night, I think back to the picture thing. I call my grandma and she says that she's never touched the picture. Very creepy, I know. Anyways, that's my story. No new encounters since May. Maybe the fact of my dad yielding a baseball bat and yelling, "Come back here, pedo," into the darkness scared him away. Hey guys, it's the Grim Raider here. So if you enjoyed that, please leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff, the routine. So from today onwards, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So from now onwards, every time I upload, on the outro of every video, I'm going to answer 2 questions from the comments of the previous video. Basically, just leave 2 questions, anything that you want me to answer, and I'll answer it in the outros of the following video. So for today, leave a comment, I'll pick 2 random ones, and then I'll answer it in the next video's outro. Have a good day.